Welcome back, gentlemen. We had a power cut over here, so power has just come back. Okay, we will continue. So we were talking about testing of the atmosphere of the space where we enter. So we saw why it is important to test the space at various levels. So we had talked about the example of a cargo tank for a ballast tanks. Any space which has got a great height. So there the gases could exist at various levels. It is not necessary that one level is safe, so all levels are safe. No, we should test the atmosphere of the space at various levels, and we should not be using personal monitoring equipment, the one that we use as a clip-on to the ballast suit pocket, which we carry inside. No, we should be using a proper explosive analyzer. And when we are checking for oxygen deficiency, we should get a steady reading of at least 20 to 21% oxygen by volume on a oxygen analyzer before the responsible person permits any entry into the space. Anything less than 20 to 21% oxygen, the responsible person should not even contemplate letting anybody enter the space. And a combustible gas indicator, that is an explosimeter, should not be used to detect oxygen deficiency. Meter is only to determine the content of explosive gases in the atmosphere. Just because there are no explosive gases in the atmosphere, it cannot be assumed that the oxygen content in the atmosphere is fine, and vice versa. The explosimeter is only to determine the explosiveness of an atmosphere as far as percentage LEL, percentage of the lower explosive limit goes. It is not an instrument for determining your oxygen deficiency by default. Just because there's no explosive atmosphere in the space, it does not mean that the oxygen level is now okay. And then, in addition to testing for, we should also be testing for flammable gases or vapors. The combustible gas indicator, called the explosimeter, detects the amount of flammable gas or vapor in the air. The instrument is capable of providing the accurate reading at low concentration, should be used to judge whether the atmosphere is safe for entry or not. So your explosimeter, only which reads in percentage LEL, only that should be used. The type of explosimeter that is always usually in ppm or in percentage LEL. So we should use the ones which can measure in percentage LEL. That means they can measure in very low concentrations whether the atmosphere is safe or not, and only that kind of instrument should be used. And the amount it detects the amount of flammable gas or vapor. If it is above the LEL, then your normal explosimeter will not be able to detect the amount of flammable gas. If it is giving some erroneous reading, that means the amount of flammable gas or vapor in the atmosphere is in all likelihood above the LEL. So that means more ventilation or more gas freeing of the space has to be carried out to bring it below the LEL, and then only this explosimeter will start measuring it. Combustible gas indicators are calibrated on a standard gas, and when testing for other gases and vapors, reference should be made to the calibration curves or the calibration table supplied with the instrument. Particular care is required should accumulations of hydrogen be suspected. So combustible gas detectors, that means same explosimeters, they are usually calibrated with your standard gas, your the standard gases for calibrating these. And with these standard gases, we can calculate the percentage LEL. And if we are testing, or rather using this combustible gas detectors for testing some other gases, the maker's calibration table or calibration curves, we should refer to them, because if the combustible gas indicator, that is explosimeter, is being tested for, being used for some other gases, it could end up giving wrong readings. We had studied this earlier, that explosimeter can again start giving wrong readings or erroneous readings, certain other gases which are present in the atmosphere. And particularly if there are accumulations of hydrogen, that will again start giving erroneous readings in your combustible gas indicator. It may indicate that the space is safe. It may not be detecting the hydrogen at all, because that is calibrated for reading hydrocarbon, whereas hydrogen is just a single element gas. So the possibility of the just hydrogen is pretty low. And then we should not have a situation where we think the space is safe for entry, but the space, due to some reason, has concentrations of or accumulations of hydrogen, and then we start doing some hot work and there is a explosion. That kind of situation should be strictly avoided. And then we have the use of permit to work system. We saw a sample of the permit to work earlier. It is varies from company to company. Entry into a dangerous space should be planned in advance, and use should be preferably made of a permit to work system. As per your company's SMS, we should make use of the permit to work system as per the guidelines laid down by the company. And if during the course of the operation unforeseen difficulties or hazards develop, the work should be stopped and the space should be evacuated so that the situation can be fully reassessed. And obviously, the permit should then be withdrawn and only issued after the situation has been reassessed. And the permit to work should be revised as appropriate, which in effect means that, let's say we make a entry into a certain space which under normal circumstances we don't routinely enter. So we have filled up the permit to work system. We have done all the required ventilation precautions that need to be taken. All that has to be taken. People have entered the space, and once they have entered the space, some unforeseen difficulties have occurred or hazards have developed. Difficulties could also be that the person who has entered, he has fallen down. He has just slipped and fallen down. It is not necessary that the atmosphere is dangerous and the atmosphere is deficient in oxygen. Unforeseen difficulties could also mean that just person, let's say, he has entered a ballast tank. There was some film of mud over there, and he's slipped. And hazards developing, of course, the hazards could develop because of some pockets of gas or pockets of oxygen deficient atmosphere on the people. They have, obviously, when you're entering a ballast tank, normally a person would not be wearing a BA set, and then suddenly he walks into a area of the ballast tank where the oxygen is less, and then he starts feeling giddy. So he has to be evacuated. Before evacuating, whatever he has gone to do, that should be stopped immediately. If he has just gone for an inspection, then the inspection should be stopped. If he had gone inside for some work, obviously all the work should be immediately be dropped, and people should come out immediately. And then the permit to work, obviously, ceases to become null and void. It ceases to exist, and it can again be reissued again after we find out why this problem occurred. If it was just a simple case of a person slipping and falling, then okay, then maybe we need to hose down some extra hosing down is required to remove the area. But if the atmosphere itself is deficient in oxygen, oxygen or contain some has been carried out, and the situation has been reassessed by retesting the atmosphere and at all levels and all areas. Like we discussed earlier, in a cargo tank, it is quite easy to test the atmosphere at all levels, but in a ballast tank it can be much more difficult, because ballast tank, all the strength members inside a ballast tank, it may not be very practical and may not be feasible or possible to test all the areas of a ballast tank due to all the transverses, stringers, etc. Ballast tanks they have many levels, plus they have many transverses. So we have to go to each and every space between the transverses to check. Then between the stringers vertically. So testing the complete atmosphere of a ballast tank is a much more challenging. Uh, is much more challenging. So only once the situation has been reassessed, and whatever caused the difficulty or the unforeseen hazards in the first place, only once that has been taken care of, then the permit to work can be reissued. But now we know that, okay, there is a problem, so the permit to work now it should contain that condition that henceforth, if anything is found, that, in other words, we are revising the permit to work. It is not the same as before. Now we are revising as per the renewed hazards which we have learned about. So the permit to work should be revised as appropriate. Situations for which a well-established safe system of work exists, a checklist may exceptionally be accepted as an alternative to a full permit to work, provided that the principles of the permit to work system are covered and the risks arising in the dangerous space are low. Now, things which we normally do in the course of our normal shipboard work. For example, on a product tanker or a chemical tanker, entering a cargo tank for manually mopping up or for inspection or for whatever, manual cleaning, etc. of the tank cleaning water after the cargo tank space has been, that may be a pretty routine in every cargo tank, and especially on a chemical tanker, you have many cargo tanks. You may have 24, maybe more, a number of very, very small cargo tanks. And the people are doing the tank cleaning and entering one tank or the other at all times. So there, it is considered to be a pretty routine kind of work. For example, our engine room, let's say your exhaust manifold cleaning, scavenge manifold cleaning, under piston space cleaning, exhaust boiler cleaning. Though these kind of work in the engine room, they would be considered to be fairly routine work. And here, whatever uh, safeties are to be taken, the second engineer who's authorizing the work and who's supervising the work, he is pretty well versed with all the precautions that need to be taken. So each and every time, he does not have to file a full permit to work. He can have a checklist for a particular work, and in the checklist, he can just check whether something has been missed out, and whether each and every point in the checklist has been ticked off as attended. Okay, this one, ventilation done, oxygen analyzed, oxygen percentage check, okay, done, etc., etc. So these are the kind of situations in which safe system of work exists. For example, even uh, something which we do not consider to be a enclosed space, your crankcase inspection, main engine crankcase inspection. Main engine crankcase, after all, is an enclosed space. Most of the time, the main engine crankcase is kept closed. It's only when we want to do, let's say, a crankshaft deflection, or we want to check bearing clearances, or just do a simple examination of the crankcase just to check for any white metal, etc. Only then we enter the frequency at which we enter the crankcase, maybe several months apart. But when we enter the main engine crankcase, that is also a pretty well-established system of work. We open the crankcase doors either on one side or maybe on both sides, and then we put blowers, ventilate the space properly, make sure the turning gear is in place, the turning gear fuse is removed, make sure the air to the main engine is completely blanked off so that accidentally the main engine will not, etc. So here we have a well-established sales system of work, and for which there may be a checklist, and as depending on that, again depends from company to company. And then in the checklist, the second engineer, he ticks off that this I've checked. Okay, turning gear engaged, tick. Turning gear fuse, motor fuse removed, tick. Main air shut off, tick. Main air valve shut, okay, tick, etc., etc. All once all these things have been ticked off, only then he will allow somebody to go inside either to or do crankshaft deflection or bearing clearances. So these are the pretty routine jobs where people do not require a very formal permit to work. On expiry of the permit to work, everyone should leave the space, and the entrance to the space should be closed or otherwise secured against entry. Alternatively, where the space is no longer a dangerous space, it can be declared safe for normal entry. So, and even in the sample permit to work, we saw that the maximum duration of that permit to work was 24 hours. But then that again depends from company to company. Most companies, they will keep it at maybe 12 hours. And then at the expiry of the 12 hours, the permit to work ceases to exist. I mean, it is not valid anymore. So after 12 hours, it becomes invalid. And before that itself, who was there in the enclosed space, they should evacuate this. Once it is made sure head count taken, etc., that everybody who had gone in has come out. That again is very important. The entrance to the space should not be closed before everybody has come out. So it should be made sure that everybody who had gone inside, everybody has come out. And once it is established that everybody is out, then the entrance to the space should be closed, or otherwise it should be blanked off against entry. So blanked off means either you put a tape across it or put a bar across it, just put the manual door back in place. Alternatively, where the space is no longer considered a dangerous space, it can be declared safe for normal entry. This again depends on the kind of space where people have entered. So we can declare it as a normal space. If there is no chance of the space again getting recontaminated or becoming filled with any dangerous vapors, which may be either be toxic or flammable. Yes, Sophonias.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Earlier in the morning, you mentioned two methods of ventilating the cargo holds for entry. One is displacement. Yeah, for entry to cargo holds. To
the cargo tanks of an oil tanker. Not cargo holds. When you talk about cargo holds, we are talking about bulk carriers. I was talking about cargo tanks of a oil tanker. The two methods are dilution method and displacement method.
Yeah, usually we are doing this displacement method by putting the hose, the flexible hose to the bottom of the tank. But I don't know about the dilution. Can you explain?
Usually, actually, if you really think about it, most of the time, actually, we are doing the dilution method. For example, we want to enter the cofferdam, or for example, we want to enter let's say, a heavy oil tank, heavy oil storage tank. We have emptied out the heavy oil storage tank. We have done water washing, cleaning, etc. We have done the venting, and with the venting, actually, we will put a blower on top, and maybe an electric blower. An electric blower, it runs pretty fast. So we are actually doing it by dilution. For displacement method, the airflow has to be very, very non-turbulent. Where most of the time when we are doing this gas freeing, we are pushing in air at a pretty high velocity. That means it becomes turbulent inside. If we put in through a hose, let's say a bellow kind of thing to the bottom of the car, bottom of the, let's say the heavy oil storage tank, for let's say it's a deep tank. If we put it through a hose, then you could say that yes, we are putting it very gradually at the pumping in air very gradually at the bottom of the tank, and slowly the air is displacing the vapors, the heavy oil vapors, which are considered to be lighter than air, and slowly it is being pushed out either from the top manhole door or being pushed out from the tank vent.
Okay, thank you.
No, but does that answer your question?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thanks. Procedures and arrangements before entry. Okay, in the previous the previous slide, there was as far as paragraph 1 is concerned, we could also have SMS procedures for our routine jobs. For a routine jobs on a tanker, especially on a product or a chemical tanker, we could a routine job could be cargo oil tank cleaning. In the engine room, fairly routine job. We just talked about it. Maybe exhaust spoiler cleaning or scavenge manifold cleaning, or even case inspection. So this, for these, in the SMS manual, they could be laid down procedures, and as per the laid down procedures, we can make checklists, and we just tick off the checklist instead of having a full blown and formal permit to work. So a lot of times the permit to work, instead of having a full formal permit to work for routine jobs in which people, due to the repetitive nature of the job, for example, exhaust spoiler cleaning, etc., due to the repetitive nature, what precautions to be taken, but just for the sake of safety, we also have a checklist in which the responsible person, he ticks off before the job is actually started. He ticks off whether all the precautions, etc., ventilation, whatever was required as per the nature of the job, whatever was required, whether all that has been done or not. So for that, we depend on the SMS procedures for the routine jobs.
Hi.
Hello. Somebody's mic is on. Access to and within the space should be adequate and well illuminated. Just a minute. Yeah, sorry. Access to and within the space should be adequate and well illuminated. Obviously, the access to the space should be proper. The reason for the access to the space being proper or should be adequate is that if the space has to be evacuated in a hurry, the exit also should be adequate. That means talking about access, but more important would be the exit, especially in the case of a situation suddenly turning hazardous. So the exit from the space should be adequate actually, and of course the space should be well illuminated so that the people who are in the space while they are working, and more important when they're accessing, and even more important when they're exiting the space, they can exit safely. If the space suddenly becomes pitch dark and they don't know which way the exit is, and that again leads to a very dangerous situation. No matches, welding, flame cutting equipment, electrical equipment, or other sources of ignition should be taken or put into the space unless the master or responsible officer is satisfied that it is safe to do so. Pretty much self-explanatory. Any source of any spark or flame or any such thing into the space, unless the space has been declared completely gas free, and completely we are talking about the explosive nature of the space. That means we have to check whether the space is contains any hydrocarbon gases or any other explosive gases. So the space has to be ventilated very well, and more so when we plan to carry out any hot work. Hot work in any enclosed space is always a very risky venture, and hot work normally on board tankers is almost never allowed. Engine room workshop, or even outside the workshop, it has to be done with company's permission. But in the engine room, by outside the workshop, I mean in the engine room. But outside the engine room, out on deck, etc., very rarely do we ever carry out any hot work unless the ship happens to be in a dry dock or ship happens to be laid up for some repairs, and the ship is completely gas free and certified gas free. So here again, we should not be carrying any matches, welding, etc., any source of flame, any source of ignition into that space, unless all the senior responsible officers are completely satisfied that it is safe to do so. In all cases, rescue and available resuscitation use at the entrance to the space. Very much so. But here I should remind that normally all this, when entering the space, we tend to follow all the laid down regulations. We'll keep our BS at the entrance of the space. We'll keep medical oxygen at the entrance of the space. We'll keep a harness, etc., etc. Everything. Maybe the stretcher also at the entrance of the space. But once we tend to forget all that. The person who's positioned at the entrance of the space, like I have repeatedly told this in the past, but I will repeat again, because this is the way that most threats occur. The person who's positioned at the entrance of the space, moment he sees that there is something going wrong with the people who are inside, or they are fainting and falling down, etc., he tends to forget all his training, and most of the time, most often than not, he becomes a casualty himself. So this is something which we should never forget, that the rescue and resuscitation and all the BS sets and stretchers and medical oxygen, and etc., which we are keeping at the entrance to the space, we are keeping that for a certain purpose, not for the person who's supposed to call for help and let's say conduct the rescue operation, he becoming a casualty himself just because he rushed in himself. Rescue equipment means BS set together with fully charged spare cylinders, lifelines, rescue harness, torches, lamps, approved for use in a flammable atmosphere. That means they have to be intrinsically safe. Especially torches and lamps, they have to be fully gas tight. You get these torches and lamps which are used for man entry into cargo tanks or tankers. So similar type of intrinsically safe torches and lamps, they have to be used. But the thing is that they have to be used in proper. Just the person who stand by at the entrance and just he is rushing in. I mean, and like I've repeated I'll repeat again, like I've repeated many times in the past, the casualties on board occur in spite of all the training. The person who's outside, he panics, or he thinks, okay, this I can do. They are right here. I can just go and save them. And that is when the problem starts. A means of hoisting an incapacitated person from the confined space should also be made readily available when appropriate. Yes, if we are working in a cargo tank, then if somebody slips and falls, cargo tanks, the bottom of a cargo tank can also have these heating coils. This, if the ship is designed for carrying heated cargo, the bottom of the cargo tank and the person who's working inside the cargo tank, I'm not talking about gases and hazards and all. He could just trip on these heating coils and fall down and hurt himself. And then maybe he hits his head somewhere, and then he has to be taken out. He's unconscious and confined space, or he could be overcome by gas. So the means of taking a person out, and this part is even on any kind of ship, leave alone tankers, on any kind of ship, to taking out a guy from inside a tank, more so if it's a ballast tank. Most of you would have gone inside a ballast tank. You know how difficult it is just to go inside when the person is in his full capacity. Now, if you are trying to take out an incapacitated person, he's like 70, 80 kg, and you're trying to pull him out with all transverses and railings and etc. pipelines, it is extremely, extremely difficult. But still, we have to keep the means to hoist an incapacitated person from inside the confined space, and people have to know how to use it. Just sometimes the incapacitated person, he can get hurt if the people who are hoisting him outside, they are inexperienced or they are not doing it properly. So the number of persons entering the space should be limited to those who actually need to work in the space and who can be rescued should an emergency occur. If somebody is entering a ballast tank or whatever enclosed space, only those, like it says, only those who need to actually go inside need to go inside. And based on the number of people who can be rescued, that is more important. If somebody can, how many people can we rescue? If let's say 10 people have gone inside a, a ballast tank or a cargo tank, do we have 10 people? If not, then we should not allow the responsible person and the competent person. They should not allow 10 people to enter the space, because you may not have 10 stretchers on board. Normally, we carry only one stretcher on board. So you may not have that many BS sets on board. You may not have that many resuscitation masks on board. So let's say these greater number of people have gone in than actually necessary. Then we should determine how many people are entering, the rescue capability that we have, the equipment which we carry on board. Otherwise, people have to enter in batches. If we have the capability and the equipment to rescue only 5 people, then only 5 people at a time go inside. Once those 5 people, they have done whatever they have gone inside to do, they can come out, and then the remaining 5 people, they go inside and continue with the job. They take it in rotation. So just because the work requires 10 people, it does not mean that 10 people should rush into the enclosed space when we do not have the means to rescue those 10 people should some hazardous situation occur. And at least one attendant should be detailed to remain at the entrance to the space while it is occupied. At least one attendant. But that attendant also is being monitored by somebody on the bridge or somebody in the engine room ECR or in the cargo control. Normally, always in continuous communication that the so and so has gone in, so and so has gone in, the names of the people who have gone in, what are they doing. He is in continuous communication so that not only the attendant but some other responsible person, he is also in the full picture as to what is going on in the space, so that in case the situation suddenly turns bad, other people can also be called upon by the attendant to come for the rescue, and like an attendant go rushing in himself to try and carry out a solo rescue. All that he'll end up doing is becoming a statistic himself. A system of communication should be agreed and tested by all involved to ensure that any person entering the space can keep in touch with the person stationed at the entrance. Also very important, the people going inside, they are normally would be carrying walkie-talkies, and they are all in normal at the entrance. And then, since everybody is on the same channel, walkie-talkie channel, the person on the bridge or the person in the ECR or the person in the CCR, cargo control room, they are also listening in to these people communicating with the guy who's keeping watch at the entrance of the space, so that, as I said earlier, everybody is in the picture, and in case something happens, everybody can attend to the rescue. And then once the senior persons they come for the rescue can be carried out more effectively. Before entry is permitted, it should be established that the entry with breathing apparatus is possible. The extent to which use of BA sets or lifelines or rescue harness would cause any difficulty of movement within a span of space or would cause problems if any incapacitated person had to be removed from the place should be examined. This is quite important. If you've seen the normal cover of a ballast tank, for a cargo tank, let's say, or a cargo hatch, the entrance is pretty wide. But in case of a ballast tank, it's only the size of the manhole cover. So a person wearing a BA set, it is very difficult for him to wear the BA set and then go in through the manhole cover. Normally, if you have to wear a BA set for some reason, first the person has to go in, and then the BA set is lowered, and then he puts on the BA set, or in some such sequence. So before the responsible person he allows the entry, and we presume that this is a non-routine kind of entry. A routine kind of entry, we normally would know what the risks are involved. But once we are carrying out some non-routine entry into a space which is not normally open, or into a space which is considered to be hazardous, we should be able to plan for the worst. And the worst case scenario is that the people who are entering in, they may get overcome, and once they get overcome, we have to rescue them. And we should not land up in a situation where we cannot rescue them because a BA set cannot be taken to them, or a lifeline cannot be taken to them, or they cannot put on any rescue harness, or God forbid, if an incapacitated person has to be removed, we cannot even lower a stretcher to that place. In such cases, the risks to the other people, not person, the people who are still in their full capacity, risk to them also increases manifold, because if they have to take out an incapacitated person through a vertical ladder, it is very difficult. And especially in a confined space, for example, let's say the person became incapacitated in the DB space of a ballast tank, to rescue him from there, it becomes very, very difficult. But we have to plan for the worst scenario, and that's why entry into these spaces should be very, very strictly controlled. Unnecessary people should not be allowed to enter. If only 2 people are required to enter, then only 2 people go. Lifelines of rescue harnesses should be long enough for the purpose and easily detachable by wearer should they become entangled, but should not otherwise come away from the rescue harness. Again, very important, if you are in the DV tank, the DV space of a ballast tank, you may be wearing a rescue harness, but your lifeline definitely will get entangled in some pipeline or some structure over there. So after some time, it may become risky for you to wear the lifeline itself. So at such point in time, the person inside, he has to take a calculated risk as to whether I can detach the lifeline. If he finds it is risky to detach the lifeline, then he should not. Then he should not proceed any further. He should come back. If he finds that it is easy, it is comparatively risk-free to detach the lifeline. He can detach the life, go further into the double bottom to do whatever he was required to do in the first place, and then come back. Once on the way out, he can put on the lifeline again, clip it onto his harness, and then come out. But it should not be that the lifeline itself is not attached properly to the harness and it gets detached, especially when the person has to be hoisted up. Procedure during entry. Ventilation should continue during the period and that the space is occupied and during temporary breaks. In the event of a failure of the ventilation system, any persons in the space should be evacuated immediately. Perfect common sense. Ventilation not only should be started well before people are required to enter. Sometimes in some cases we even started say 24 hours in advance. For example, I'm just giving an example. We have storage tank where you have to go in to repair a leaking meal. So we empty out ventilated, but the ventilation we would normally start maybe a good 24 hours before the people are required to go inside. And it may be the situation may be are required to carry out hot work. Maybe the that temporary cold work may not work. So in case we are required to carry out hot work hot work repairs to the steam heating coil, then we need to carry out much more ventilation. Because now we are talking about military. That means carrying out hot work inside a tank which had contained but also about the present. Yeah, heavy fuel oil also contains traces of H2S. So we could also encounter toxic gases plus explosive gases. So the ventilation has to be carried out much before the has to be started much before the work starts and should be carried out while the work is going on. And in case for some reason, for whatever reason, the ventilation fails, then the people who are doing the work inside the repair work of the heating coil inside the storage tank, they have to come out easier. They should not think that okay, it's too difficult to come out, so okay, we'll just wait for the power to come back on or for the blower to restart again, etc., etc. No, the responsible person who is there at the entrance, he immediately asks, well, okay, let's come out now, and they should come like, and then the they're doing the work, and in case for any space inside is becoming hazardous, or these people they have opened some pipe coming out now, vapors could be toxic or explosive or Right, we had an internet stoppage. Okay, we'll continue now. But the internet signal continues to be pretty weak. Anyway, we'll continue as best possible. But in case you cannot hear my voice, please let me know immediately. Can come back. Somebody come back. Can you hear my voice now?
Yes, Chief, we can hear you.
Yes, sir, we can hear you. Yes.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you, sir. Yes.
Hello. Can you hear my voice?
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Hello. Can you hear my voice? Hello.
Yes, Chief, we can hear you.
Okay. Thanks, Sophonius.
We can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you, Chief.
Okay. Thanks, Melissa. Okay. Understood. You guys can hear my voice. In the event of a failure, the ventilation system, any persons in the space should be evacuated immediately. So the person who is responsible at the entrance of the space, he should be able to withdraw everybody from the space, and the people who are inside the space, they should not try to for any shortcut. Say that no, okay, it's too difficult to come out. We'll wait for the power to come back on, or we'll wait for the ventilation. Person at the entrance, he tells the people to come out, then they have to come out. Atmosphere should be tested periodically while the space is occupied, quite true, and the person should be instructed to leave the space should any deterioration in the conditions occur. So in case the people who are working inside, they are told by the response, the space is now oxygen deficient or nature. What is the problem? Can no, so somebody just send a message that we have a problem.
No, Chief, it's not. I'm writing just a text for you. I am asking you one question, not finish. I didn't finish, Chief. Go ahead.
Right. Difficulties or hazards develop, the work in the space should be stopped. Pretty much self-explanatory, and the space evacuated so the situation can be reassessed. Once the due to some reason the ventilation has stopped, or some toxic or explosive gases have escaped due to the nature of the work the people were doing inside, and people have been asked to come out. Once the let's say the ventilation goes back, ventilation restarts, etc. The situation has to be reassessed all over again. We cannot just assume that okay, everything will be okay. Okay, people, you can go back in. No, the responsible person has to reassess the situation all over again, test the atmosphere all over again before he can even think of sending anybody back inside. So once the people have come out, it should be considered that question is again we are restarting the whole exercise right from the beginning. That means we are entering the space for the first time and we are checking the atmosphere for the first time. We should assume that instead of making any assumptions that we think it'll be fine. No, that kind of approach is not fine. If a person in a space feels in any way adverse, signal to the attendant standing by the entrance and immediately leave the space. If any person he is inside and due to some reason he feels that he cannot perform the duty for which he has gone inside, whether it is repairs, whether it is inspection, whatever, he should immediately inform either by walkie-talkie, or if he's got a lifeline, he gives a 2-3 pulls on the lifeline, and so that he informs the attendant who's at the space, at the entrance of the space. The attendant is to inform the other parties. For example, inform the bridge, inform the ECR, as the case may be, or inform the CCR, cargo control room, depending on where this space is. His job is to make sure this person comes out, and before that, his job is to make sure that the other people are aware that one person, he's there inside and he's not feeling good. Now, the not feeling good could be due to toxic gas, due to maybe inflammable gas, or maybe just the space is too hot and he's sweating too much, and then it has happened to us many times, happens to us all in the engine room, especially if the ship is in a very hot tropical climate, that we may start feeling giddy if we are entering a space that is very hot and humid, and then due to the high sweating, etc., or let's say there could be salt shortage in our body, and then we start feeling giddy. So in such cases, we should not take any shortcuts. If the person is feeling giddy, he should evacuate immediately. And when available, a rescue harness should be worn to facilitate recovery in the event of an accident. If it is so required that the person has become so incapacitated that he needs a rescue harness, then yes. If the space permits, then again, it depends from place to place. This again is, we cannot apply the same kind of harness or stretcher, etc., etc. The same solution cannot be put for each and every space. For each and every space, the responsible person and the competent person, they would have to adapt as per the space and as per the kind of work where which is being carried out in this particular space. And should an emergency occur, the general or crew alarm should be sounded so that the backup is immediately available to the rescue team. That is why it is very important for the attendant to be in touch with all parties, bridge, ECR, CCR, wherever, so that in case he occurs, in case we have a situation, then the attendant, he informs all parties and everybody can rush for the rescue, instead of the attendant trying to carry out a rescue on his own. The backup team is immediately available, and of course the seniors can also come and take charge of the situation, and so that a proper rescue can be carried out. If the atmosphere is considered to be suspect or unsafe to enter without BA, then the space should only be entered if it is essential for testing purposes, the working of the ship, or for the safety of life, or for the safety of the ship. If the atmosphere is considered to be suspect and unsafe to enter without BA, normally these kind of risks we do not, he goes on to say that the space should only be entered if it is essential for testing purposes, the working of the ship, or for the safety of life, or for the safety of the ship. Here we are looking at a totally emergency situation where the space is suspect or it is totally unsafe to enter without a BA. That means the person who is entering, he has to wear a BA. The space is not properly ventilated, and these kind of circumstances will only occur in if the situation actually demands it. Okay, I can give you an example on the older type of tankers where the valves used to be, the cargo tank valves used to be at the bottom of the cargo tank. The valve wheel used to be on the deck level. So you have about a 20-meter long spindle going to the gate valve. Most of them were gate valves going to the gate valve, which is at the bottom of the cargo tank. And times it has happened that the level in the cargo tank has come down to the absolute bottom level, and then for some reason the spindle has got detached. I'm just giving you an arbitrary example. In such circumstances, and the ship is in port, so there is the port will not allow gas freeing and tank cleaning and etc. to be carried out. So the person, he has to enter the inerted atmosphere of a cargo tank wearing a BA set, maybe wearing a fireman suit also, or wearing a chemical suit, and then he has to. There used to be times when, in olden times, when people had to do all this, go inside the cargo tank, and maybe some pin in that spindle has fallen out, has broken, and put the pin back or put the nut back and connect the spindle back to the valve, basically. So under those kind of circumstances, person would have to enter the space, the cargo tank space, which is definitely unsafe to enter. So he would have to enter wearing a BA set and wearing a chemical suit also. And then he's gone inside the cargo tank and done this work and come out. Nowadays, with these automated ships, you don't hear of such incidents too often. Because most of the valves, they are hydraulically operated from the CCR. But in olden times, a lot of this kind of incidents used to happen. The number of persons compatible with the work to be performed. Quite right. We have already talked about this. There should not be any more people entering the space than necessary. If you need two persons to carry out the work, then only 2 people enter. The third person, he is standing at the entrance, monitoring what these 2 people are doing and monitoring their condition. And these 2 people, they are in constant touch with him by walkie-talkie, and they are constantly appraising him of their situation, whether they are okay or not, and what is the status of the work which they are doing. And the person the attendant who's there at the entrance, he is reporting back to the rest of the vessel, to the relevant people in the. Okay, things are going well, and this is how much the work has progressed, and the condition of these people is okay or not okay. And in such cases, obviously, when you are entering a atmosphere where the atmosphere is suspect or known to be unsafe, you always have to wear a BA suit, and or there's no or. You have to wear a BA suit and maybe a chemical suit also in case the atmosphere is really bad. Except in case of emergency or where impractical because of movement in the space would be seriously impeded, 2 supplies should be available to the wearer of a breathing apparatus which is required to work in a dangerous space. The wearer should normally use the continuous supply provided from the outside, and he should immediately make his way out of the space should it be necessary to change over to the self-contained supply. That means he is carrying a BA set. The space where he has entered is so risky that by the competent person and by the responsible person that he needs to have redundancy as far as air supply is concerned. So just the BA will not suffice. He has to be wearing the BA just for emergency. The surface, that is from outside the space or outside, let's say from the deck space. Let's say he has entered the cargo tank space. From the deck, we are supplying continuous air through a bellow. So the air supply which he is getting is totally uninterrupted. And only if the air supply, the continuous air supply is interrupted, only then this person is interrupted, or this person encounters some situation where he feels that evacuation of the space is necessary, or he is told to evacuate the space immediately, then he changes over to his BA supply, which is the self-contained unit, and gets out of the space ASAP. During occupation of the space, precautions should be taken to provide source of air to the wearer of the breathing apparatus. Quite true. If he has that redundancy as far as air supply is concerned, he is wearing a BA set, but he is not using the BA set. He is using the continuous air supply. So the responsible person, he has to take additional precautions to ensure that the continuous source of air supply from outside, the continuous source of air is being supplied to this person continuously without any interruption. If it's a foot operated bellow, then he has to make sure that there is more than one operating the bellow. After some time, he may get tired. For example, he may get tired. So the second person should be standing by to take over the pumping of the foot operated bellow from the first person, and then vice versa. They take turns. It should not be that one person he becomes tired and thereafter he's unable to operate the foot operated bellow, or his rate of pumping due to his tiredness slows down, and the supply of air to the person who is inside the enclosed space that reduces. And special attention should be given to supplies originating from the engine room. Now, why is he talking about air supplies originating from the engine room? We have earlier talked about that air supplies from the engine room. The atmosphere in the engine room itself can be full of lubile vapors and also some escaping, let's say, flue gas from main engine or generators. So the atmosphere in the engine room can be suspect. And then you have the air supply being given from the engine room for some reason. Let's say it is being given from your, let's say, service air. Now, service air can contain a lot of lube oil and moisture. If the service air does not pass through a dryer, it can contain a lot of lube oil and moisture which originated from the service air compressor itself. So as a result, the air which is being given by the service air compressor should not be assumed to be safe for breathing. So that's why we need to give special attention to air supplies which come from the engine room. That's why from time to time, even your BA compressor, the air from your BA compressor that is put in a bottle and that is sent ashore periodically, maybe once a year or something, to shore lab, so that you have a certificate saying that the air which is being produced or being pumped into the bottles by your BA compressor, that particular air is safe for human breathing. Same reason here, special attention should be given to supplies originating from the engine room, because your service air is not necessarily, it is definitely not designed for human breathing, and it should not be assumed that it is safe for breathing. Where remote testing of the space is not reasonably practicable, or where a brief inspection only is required, a single air supply may be acceptable provided prolonged presence in the space is not required and the wearer of the breathing apparatus is so situated that he can be hauled out immediately in the case of an emergency. If he's, as it says, if the space cannot be remotely tested and the person who's entering inside, he's just going inside just to have a look and come out again. He has to enter the space just to see something and come out immediately. Then the competent person or the responsible person, he can take a call as per his discretion, as per his assessment of the situation, that yes, okay, in this case, he does not require two sources of air supply. Just a single air supply can be acceptable in this case, provided this person within the whatever time they have decided upon, within 5 minutes he comes out, or within 10 minutes he comes out. In that case, he can take a call as per the situation, that okay, he can only take a single source of air supply, which could be the air pump or could be the BA. Most likely it will be the BA set, and the wearer of the BA set is so situated that he can be hauled out immediately in case the situation deteriorates, he can be pulled out immediately. So this is a call which the responsible person or the competent person or both have to take. That yes, the space where we are entering, it has to be entered. There is no way, because the operation of the ship or the safety of the people on board depends on, we have to check this space, and we know that the space is suspect, or we know that the space is possibly completely not suspect, it's possibly completely unsafe, but still we have to enter it. Then in such a case, a single air supply may be acceptable, provided the exposure of the person who's entering it to that space is not for too long. Rescue harnesses should be worn wherever practicable. Lifelines should also be used. If rescue harnesses should be worn and wherever used. Sometimes people have gone inside ballast tanks. As you know, in the case of our double hull vessels, the ballast tanks are on the outside of the vessel, and sometimes the vessel has gone and hit, let's say, the fender, the jetty fender with a lot of force, or some tug has come and bumped against the ship, and then you have a hole on your ship side. That means you have seawater coming into your ballast tank. Ballast tank was earlier empty, and now you have seawater coming in, and then the people inside, they are required to, I mean, the people on board, they are required to go and find out where exactly the accident happened. They may be able to see it from the outside, or they may not be able to if it is below the water line. In such cases, what do? They keep the ballast pump running continuously, and then the minimum amount of people required. In such cases, maybe you would send 2 people inside. So they put on in their rescue harnesses, etc., and they go inside to inspect the space. In such a case, we may not be able to ventilate the ballast tank maybe for the required 6 hours, 8 hours, whatever. If we have to go and see the ballast tank now, means we have to go and see the ballast tank, the amount of damage, we have to go and see it now. So in such cases, the people should wear rescue harnesses, and wherever practicable, they should also use a lifeline in case the ballast tank starts flooding, in case the ingress of water into the ballast tank is more than the ballast pump can handle. I'm just giving a very off the cuff kind of example. And the lifeline should be attended by a person stationed at the entrance who has been trained how to pull out an unconscious person from the dangerous space. Quite true. And not only that, the attendant, he finds that the person inside has become unconscious, he should not try to pull him out himself. He should call for help. And where the dangerous space to be entered requires the possible use of hoisting equipment to effect the rescue, arrangements should be made to ensure that persons would be available to operate it as soon as possible. Obviously, if unconscious person cannot be pulled out from any space by another person, single person alone. Just because it will require more than one person, and the adequate number of persons should be at hand, or rather, the attendant should be able to call them, and they should be able to attend the space reasonably well, reasonably soon enough to pull out this unconscious person. Where appropriate, portable lights and other electrical equipment should be of the type approved for use in a flammable atmosphere. We have already talked about this in one of our previous safety classes. That means the portable lights and the electrical equipment which we are using. And if you recall the definition of intrinsically safe, equipment and wiring incapable of releasing sufficient electrical or thermal energy under normal or abnormal conditions to cause ignition of a specific hazardous atmospheric mixture in its most easily ignited concentration. So that is the actual definition of an intrinsically safe equipment. So the equipment should under no circumstances be able to cause an explosion in the flammable atmosphere. as I had mentioned, most of the cargo lights which we use on board tankers inside the cargo tank space, they are intrinsically safe. But these cargo lights, they are pneumatically operated. That means they are operated by you take the cargo light down to the bottom of the cargo tank, but the cargo light has got this flexible air hose where we have the compressed air at your deck air. That means your 8 bar that is powering a turbine. The turbine is running a small DC generator, and the DC generator is providing the electricity for the light. Also, you have portable lights which are called Wolf lights. Wolf is a name of a company that produces these intrinsically safe lights. Again, those are these Wolf lights. They are battery powered, but they are completely, the light itself is completely sealed. You may have used these Wolf lights on board your vessels also, but on tankers they are very common. And these Wolf lights, again, equipment, any other equipment which you are using inside the flammable atmosphere, walkie-talkies, anything which you are using inside a flammable atmosphere, they have to be intrinsically safe. And should there be any hazard due to chemicals, whether in liquid, gaseous form, coming into contact with the skin and or eyes, then protective clothing should be worn. Earlier, I was talking about these chemical suits. In case somebody is going into a cargo tank or any space where that space has contained chemical vapors, whether space in liquid, or it still has some cargo residues, or in liquid form, or in gaseous form, or in the form of chemical, in the form of vapor, then these chemicals, again, we cannot allow that those chemicals to come into contact with the skin or the eyes. Eyes are again exposed. Our nose and mouth is taken care of by the BA set. So our nose and mouth is not coming into contact with these vapors, with these chemicals. But eyes, again, they are exposed. The skin also, some chemicals, as we have read, some chemicals can be very easily absorbed through the skin. And since they can be absorbed through the skin, they can be hazardous for our health. So in that case, we have to wear protective, is called chemical suits. Sophonias, you say something?
Roger.
Hello? Yes, Sophonias, you wanted to say something?
No, Roger.
Okay, I just saw your name flashed up over here, so I thought you wanted to ask something. Next is maintenance of equipment. Okay, gentlemen, I think if you have any questions, maintenance of equipment, we can take it up in our next class. Our class of today, please go ahead.
Hello, Chief. Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Suppose
speaking?
in some situations, it's Haila Michael speaking.
Yes, Haila Michael.
Suppose in some situations that the captain needs to go in the ballast tank for some inspection. That time, who will sign his permit to work? There is permit to work. Somebody must be signed.
Right. No, normally under such circumstances, the captain should be the last person. Captain or chief engineer should be the last person to enter any enclosed space. But he has to sign himself. But if he is entering himself, then the office has to know. He and the chief mate together, they cannot enter. If the captain is entering, that means the chief mate should be outside. And then the office has to know, and the office has to give permission for the captain to enter. Similarly, the chief engineer in the engine room, the chief engineer and the second engineer should not be entering this any hazardous space together. If the chief engineer is entering, then the second engineer has to be outside. and the second engineer can sign for that he is the responsible person. He is taking charge of the entire operation of the chief engineer entering the enclosed space. Similarly, chief mate, he can sign for it and say, okay, I'm the responsible person. And since the captain, he has to see this, whatever thing he wants to see inside the enclosed space, and I will monitor the situation so that the captain or the chief engineer, they come out safely. Does that answer your question?
Okay, okay, Chief. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? Right, gentlemen. Have a good lunch. Bon appetit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good
Thank you.
afternoon.
Thank you.